The day I graduated, there was one empty row in the audience that felt louder than applause.
6 seats,
all blank. My parents' seats. And taped to the armrest of one chair was a sticky note in my mother's handwriting. Your brother already had plans. You'll understand when you're older. I didn't cry. Not then. Because in that moment, something inside me didn't break. It hardened. And that was the day I decided I would never be the understanding daughter again. Hey everyone, I'm Madison Cooper. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, if you've ever been told to sacrifice your happiness because you're strong enough to handle it, this story is going to stay with you. Before we dive deeper, tell me in the comments where you're listening from tonight. I love seeing how far these stories reach. And if you believe that sometimes the coldest revenge isn't loud, it's quiet, go ahead and like and subscribe. Because what happened after that graduation day? It changed everything. I used to think love meant patience. That's what my mother always said. Be patient, Emily, you're the older one, you should understand. Understand. That word followed me my entire life like a shadow. Understand why my birthday parties got postponed, because my younger brother Ryan had soccer tournaments. Understand why my parents missed my debate finals, because Ryan needed support. Understand why the college fund they promised me was suddenly split, because Ryan struggled in school and needed extra help. He was only 2 years younger than me. But somehow, everything in our family revolved around him. He wasn't cruel. He didn't bully me. He just existed at the center of their world, while I lived at the edges of it. At first, I didn't resent him. I resented the way my parents looked at him. Like he was fragile glass. And looked at me like I was steel that could never bend, never crack, never need. By my final year of college, I had stopped expecting much from them. I worked 2 jobs. Graduated with honors. Paid for most of my education myself. Late nights at a cafe that smelled permanently like burnt coffee and sugar syrup. Cold winters walking home alone after midnight shifts. Studying until my eyes blurred. All while telling myself it was worth it. Because graduation day would be proof. Proof that I built something without their help. So when the date was announced, I called them immediately. I was smiling so hard my cheeks hurt. May 18th, I said, Saturday, 3 in the afternoon. There was a pause. Just a small one. But it made my stomach tighten. Oh, my mother said slowly, that might be complicated. My fingers went cold. Why? Well, Ryan and his friends booked a beach trip that weekend. I blinked. What does that have to do with my graduation? Silence. Then she said it. Casually, like it made perfect sense. Could you talk to your university and see if you can walk another day? For a second I thought she was joking. I even laughed. You want me to change my graduation date, I said carefully, because Ryan has a vacation. It's not just a vacation, she snapped. It's his last summer before adulthood. My chest tightened. This is my graduation, I whispered. I worked my entire life for this. And we're proud, she said quickly. But then came the sentence that carved itself into my memory forever. You're strong, Emily. You don't need us there the way he needs this trip. That's when something inside me shifted. A quiet, cold realization. It wasn't about timing. It wasn't about convenience. It was about value. Ryan's happiness mattered more than my achievement. I said no. Calmed, firm. No, Mom, I'm not changing it. She sighed like I'd disappointed her. All right, she said, we'll see what we can do. But I already knew. They weren't coming. Graduation day arrived bright and warm. The campus buzzed with families carrying flowers, balloons, cameras. Parents crying and hugging their kids. Pride everywhere. I stood alone in my cap and gown, clutching my phone. Checking it every few seconds. No messages. No calls. Then I saw the empty seats. 6 reserved chairs. Mine. I walked toward them slowly, like my feet weighed 100 pounds. And that's when I saw the sticky note. Your brother already had plans. You'll understand when you're older. My hands trembled as I peeled it off. The world around me blurred into noise. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel angry yet. Just hollow. Like something inside me had finally gone quiet. When my name was called, I walked across that stage alone. The applause sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. And when I shook the dean's hand, I realized something strange. I didn't feel proud. I felt finished. Finished hopping. Finished trying. Finished being the one who always understood. That night they called. My dad sounded cheerful. Hey kiddo, how was the ceremony? Kiddos. I hadn't felt like their kid in years. It was fine, I said. We saw pictures online, he continued. You looked happy. I swallowed hard. You didn't come. Well, Ryan's trip. I know about the trip. There was a pause. Then he said the sentence that turned the hollow feeling into something darker. You'll have other milestones. This was just a ceremony. Just a ceremony. I stared at the wall for a long time after that call ended. And that's when the anger arrived. Slow, heavy, burning. Because I realized something. They didn't think they had hurt me. They thought this was normal. They thought I would always forgive them. Always adjust. Always understand. And in that moment, I made a decision. I wouldn't argue. I wouldn't scream. I wouldn't beg for acknowledgement. I would do something worse. I would step back. Completely. Quietly. And let them feel what life was like. Without me holding everything together. It started small. I stopped calling first. Stopped reminding them about bills they forgot to pay. Stopped helping Ryan with job applications. Stopped fixing family problems they never even noticed I solved. Weeks passed. Then months. At first they didn't notice. Because they never noticed me unless they needed something. But eventually, the first crack appeared. It happened 3 months later. My phone rang late at night. My mother's name flashed on the screen. Her voice sounded panicked. Emily, we need your help. I sat in silence, listening to the desperation in her tone. And for the first time in my life, I didn't rush to save them. Because in that moment, I realized something powerful. They were about to discover what it felt like. To be the one left alone in an empty seat. And this time, I wasn't going to understand. I was going to make sure they never forgot. My mother's voice that night didn't sound like the woman who used to brush off my feelings with a tired sigh. It sounded small, shaky, almost scared. Emily, she said again, are you there? I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. The fan spun slowly above me, its soft clicking filling the silence between her breaths. I'm here, I said. We need your help. Those words used to hit me like a reflex. For years they had trained me like a switch. Whenever my parents called with that tone, I would drop everything, skip meals, cancel plans, fix whatever mess Ryan had created. But this time, something inside me stayed still. Cold. Quiet. What kind of help? I asked. There was a pause, then she exhaled sharply. It's Ryan, he's in trouble. Of course he was. He was always in trouble. But this time, her voice held something different. Fear. He got into some financial issues, she said carefully. He signed a lease he can't afford, and there's credit card debt, a lot of it. I closed my eyes. The old me would have already been opening my laptop, calculating, figuring out solutions. But instead, I asked the question I had never asked before. How much? Another pause. Then she whispered the number. It felt like someone dropped a brick into my stomach. It was more money than I had saved in 3 years of working non-stop. How did this happen? I said quietly. He was trying to start a business, she rushed to explain. You know how ambitious he is, he just needed support. Support? The word echoed bitterly in my chest. And you want me to fix it, I said. Well, her voice wavered. You're good with finances, and you've always been responsible. We thought maybe you could help us figure out a plan, or maybe help him with a loan. There it was. Not a request. An expectation. Like it had always been. I felt my jaw tighten. For a moment I didn't speak. And in that silence, I realized something that made my hands tremble. They weren't asking because they valued me. They were asking because they assumed I would say yes. Because I always had. My mother's voice softened. Emily, please, he's your brother. I stared at the dark window across the room, seeing my reflection staring back at me. Tired eyes. Tight shoulders. A lifetime of swallowing disappointment. And suddenly, memories flooded in. Birthdays spent alone. Awards accepted without applause. That sticky note on the graduation chair. Your brother already had plans. I inhaled slowly. And then, for the first time in my life, I said something they had never heard from me before. No. The silence on the other end felt like a vacuum. What? My mother whispered. I can't help him, I said calmly. But you have savings. You always save, she said, disbelief creeping into her voice. Yes, I replied. I saved for my future. There was a sharp inhale. Emily, this is family. I swallowed the bitterness rising in my throat. Was I family when you skipped my graduation? The words came out steady. But inside, my heart pounded so hard it hurt. She didn't answer. She couldn't. Because we both knew the truth. Finally, she said quietly, that's not the same thing. I let out a slow breath. It is to me. Her tone shifted then. Less pleading. More defensive. You're being selfish. The word landed like a slap. And something inside me snapped. Selfish, I repeated softly. You want to talk about selfish? My voice shook now, years of buried hurt spilling out. I paid for my own education, while you drained the college fund for Ryan. I worked 2 jobs while you paid his rent. You missed every achievement of mine to attend his smallest inconveniences. My chest burned as I spoke. And now, after skipping the most important day of my life, you expect me to clean up his mess. Silence. Heavy. Uncomfortable. Then my mother said something that changed everything. You're the older one, you're supposed to take care of him. The words hit like ice water. Not even an apology. Not even a hint of regret. Just expectation. Entitlement. I laughed softly. But there was no humor in it. No, I said. And for the first time in my life, my voice felt strong. I'm not supposed to take care of him, you chose to. I ended the call before she could respond. My hands were shaking. My heart raced. And then something strange happened. Instead of guilt, I felt relief. Deep, overwhelming relief. Like I had finally put down a weight I'd carried my entire life. But that relief didn't last long. Because over the next weeks, the consequences began. My parents stopped calling. Stopped texting. It wasn't a dramatic confrontation. It was colder than that. Silence. The kind meant to punish. And for a while, it worked. I would stare at my phone at night, wondering if I had gone too far. Wondering if I really was selfish. But then I would remember that empty row at graduation. And the guilt would fade. Months passed. Then one evening, I got a message from an unknown number. "Emily, it's Ryan." My stomach tightened. I hadn't heard from him since the phone call. "I need to talk to you." I stared at the screen for a long time. Part of me wanted to ignore it, but curiosity won. We met at a small coffee shop. He looked different. Tired. Stressed. Not the carefree golden child I'd known. He didn't even greet me properly. Just sat down and said, "You really let this happen to me." The words stunned me. "I didn't do anything to you," I said quietly. "You refused to help," he snapped. "Mom and Dad had to take out a second mortgage because of you." Because of me. I felt something inside me grow cold again. "No," I said calmly, "because of your choices." His eyes flashed with anger. "You've always been jealous," he said. "This is your chance to get back at me." Jealous? The accusation felt surreal. But as he kept talking, blaming, twisting reality, I realized something that made my chest ache. He truly believed it. He had grown up so used to being protected that he couldn't even imagine being responsible for himself. That's when I knew. This wasn't just about my parents. It was about an entire system that had been built around him. A system where I was invisible until they needed me. And sitting there, listening to him blame me for his downfall, I felt something shift inside me again. This time it wasn't pain. It was clarity. Because in that moment, I realized my silence wasn't enough. If I wanted true closure, I needed them to understand exactly what they had done. Not through arguments, not through begging, but through consequences they could never ignore. And that's when the idea first formed. Slow, careful, precise. A plan that wouldn't hurt them physically, but would force them to face the truth. And for the first time in my life, I felt something dangerous. Control. The first time I realized how much power I actually had, it scared me. Not because it felt wrong, but because it felt calm. Too calm. Like standing in the eye of a storm while everything else spun wildly around you. For most of my life I had been reacting, fixing, adjusting, swallowing pain to keep the peace. But now, for the first time, I wasn't reacting anymore. I was watching, studying, and slowly planning. It started with something small. Distance. Real, complete distance. I didn't just stop helping them financially, I stopped helping them emotionally. No more answering calls at midnight. No more listening to my mother vent for hours about Ryan's problems. No more stepping in to solve conflicts. At first they tried their usual tactics. Guilt messages. Passive-aggressive texts. "Your father isn't sleeping well because he's worried about you. We don't understand why you've changed so much. Family should support each other." Each message used to feel like a hook pulling into my chest. But now, they just looked predictable. Like reading the same script over and over. And the more I stayed silent, the more desperate they became. 3 months after I refused to help Ryan, my father finally called. Not cheerful this time. Not casual. His voice sounded tired. Older. "Emily," he said quietly, "we need to talk." I didn't respond immediately. I let the silence stretch. For the first time in my life, he was the one waiting for me. "We've done a lot for you," he continued. "You're acting like we abandoned you." The words hit something raw. But I didn't react. Instead, I asked a simple question. "Did you read the note you left on my graduation seat?" He hesitated. "What note?" I almost laughed. Of course he didn't know. That sticky note had been my mother's doing. So I read it to him. Word for word. There was a long silence afterward. And then quietly, he said something that made my stomach twist. "You're still stuck on that."
Still stuck?
Like it was a minor inconvenience. Like it hadn't shattered something fundamental inside me. And in that moment, I knew exactly what my revenge needed to be. It wouldn't be loud. It wouldn't be cruel. It would be undeniable. They needed to feel what it meant. To not matter. To be replaced. To realize too late that they had lost something irreplaceable. And that's when I made the most important decision of my life. I stopped being their daughter. Completely. Not emotionally. Legally. Practically. Publicly. I moved across the country without telling them. Changed my emergency contacts. Removed them from everything. Medical forms. Financial documents. Even my wills. I didn't block them. I didn't disappear. I simply stopped existing in their world. At the same time, I started building something new. A life where I wasn't the invisible one. I focused on my career. Worked relentlessly. Within 2 years, I had a promotion. Then another. My salary doubled. I bought my own apartment. A place with huge windows and warm sunlight that filled every corner. For the first time, my home felt peaceful. No tension. No expectations. Just quiet. And slowly, I built something else too. A support system. Friends who celebrated my achievements. Colleagues who respected me. People who showed up when I mattered. Something my parents never had. Meanwhile, their world was falling apart. I didn't see it directly, but I heard about it. Through relatives. Through whispers. Ryan's debt had spiraled. My parents were drowning in loans. They had to sell their vacation property. Their retirement savings were nearly gone. And for the first time in their lives, they had no safety net. Because the one person who had always been their backup plan was no longer there. 2 years after my graduation, I received a letter. Handwritten. From my mother. The envelope looked worn, like she had rewritten it multiple times. Inside, the words were shaky. "We didn't realize how much you did for us until you stopped." I read that line over and over. My hands trembled. But I didn't cry. Because it wasn't an apology. It was a realization. And it had come too late. Weeks later, my father called again. This time, his voice sounded fragile. "We want to see you," he said. "Why?" I asked. There was a long pause. Then he whispered, "Because we're scared we've lost you." The words landed heavily in my chest. And in that moment, I realized something. This was it. The final stage. Not revenge through anger. Not revenge through confrontation. But through truth. They were finally feeling what I had felt my entire life. Invisible. Unimportant. Alone. And now, I had a choice. I could return. Or I could finish what I started. I met them one last time. In the same house I grew up in. It looked smaller than I remembered. Quieter. Like the walls themselves felt tired. My mother looked older. My father's shoulders were slumped. And Ryan's, for the first time in his life, wouldn't meet my eyes. No one spoke for a long moment. Then my mother started crying. "I'm sorry," she whispered. The words felt surreal, because I had imagined hearing them for years. But now that they were here, they didn't bring relief, only distance. I looked at them calmly and said the sentence I had carried inside me for so long. "You didn't lose me today. My voice was steady. You lost me the day you decided I didn't matter. Silence filled the room. Heavy, unavoidable. And in that moment, they finally understood. Not because I yelled. Not because I punished them. But because they could see it in my eyes. I was already gone. And that realization broke them more than anything else ever could. For the first time in my life, I walked away without looking back. Not out of anger. Not out of cruelty. But out of peace. Because the greatest revenge I ever took was building a life so full, so stable, so independent, that they had no place left in it. And the hardest part for them to accept was that they couldn't fix it. They couldn't apologize enough. They couldn't undo the past. They could only live with the consequences. Just like I had. For years. In the end, I didn't destroy them. I didn't humiliate them. I simply did what they had done to me my entire life. I stopped showing up. And sometimes, silence is the loudest revenge of all. If this story hit you, if you've ever been the one who was expected to carry everything quietly, tell me in the comments where you're listening from. And remember this: you don't owe loyalty to people who treat you like an option. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is walk away and never look back. And the strangest part of all, for years I used to imagine revenge as something loud, dramatic, something that would make them finally feel the exact pain I felt. But real life doesn't work like that. Real life is quieter. It's sitting in your peaceful apartment on a Sunday morning, sunlight warming your face, realizing you slept through the night without anxiety for the first time in years. It's celebrating a promotion with people who clap the loudest when you win, instead of asking what you can do for them next. It's checking your phone and noticing there are no guilt messages waiting. Just silence. Peaceful silence. And sometimes late at night, I still think about that graduation day. About the empty seats. About that sticky note. But now when I picture it, I don't feel the hollow ache anymore. Because I understand something I didn't back then. Those empty seats weren't proof that I was unimportant. They were proof that I had been standing alone all along. And once I accepted that, I stopped feeling abandoned. I started feeling free. The last time I heard about my parents was through a distant relative. They're still struggling financially. Still trying to repair things with Ryan. Still hoping, apparently, that one day I'll come back. But the truth is, there's nothing left to come back to. Because the version of me that kept waiting for their approval doesn't exist anymore. She disappeared the day she walked across that graduation stage alone. And in her place, someone stronger walked out. Someone who finally chose herself. If you've ever been the one who was told to understand, while everyone else took your place. If you've ever been treated like the backup plan in your own family, let this be your reminder. You are not selfish for protecting your peace. You are not cruel for refusing to carry people who never carried you. And sometimes, the most satisfying revenge isn't making them hurt. It's showing them they no longer have the power to. Thanks for listening tonight. I'm Madison Cooper. Before you go, tell me in the comments where you're listening from, and if you've ever had to walk away to protect your own worth. And if this story stayed with you, don't forget to like and subscribe. Because sometimes, the quietest endings are the most powerful ones of all.